Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Prodigy Season 2, Part 1. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing the first 10 episodes of Season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning up to Episode 10 of Season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy. If you have not seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, as of the time of the recording of this video, I have not seen episodes 11 through 20 yet, so I'm giving my opinion not knowing what's going to happen next. And I will go through each episode, one episode at a time, although sometimes it's hard for me to remember what happened in which because it's a bit serialized, and when you binge watch something it all tends to blend together, which is why I tend to not sort of review shows that drop all at once separately, which is why I'm sort of bunching them together. It's a format I'm not a big fan of, to be honest, and I think I really get the strong impression that that wasn't what the intention was when they were making this season, because they didn't know it was going to air on Netflix when they were making it. So it was made to with the thought that it would be aired weekly on Paramount Plus. So it's really odd watching season 2 of Prodigy this way, where binge watching it where the entire 20 episodes are dropped on the same day, because season 1 was aired so gradually. So they aired like the first 5 episodes 1 week after another, and then they stopped and took a break for I can't remember, 4 or 5 months, and then they aired 5 more episodes 1 week after another, and then stopped and took a break for nearly a year. As far as I remember, it was 8 months or 9 months. It was almost like it was a totally new season. And then when they came back, they aired the last 10 episodes again 1 week after another. So it's not just that the episodes were released weekly, is that they had gigantic breaks in between batches of episodes where it felt like it could have been a totally different season. The second half of season 1, I almost think of it as a totally different season, yet they still call it season 1. Whereas here, 20 episodes all at once, and it's jarring for me, because that hasn't been my experience with Prodigy. And as I mentioned before, and this holds mostly true on shows like this that I want to, interact with. I want to do YouTube videos on them, and I want to watch other people's YouTube videos on them and see other people's thoughts and reviews and theories and commentary and everything in between. And that's for shows like that, I like it aired weekly. The Expanse is one example, because when that was aired weekly, but then Amazon picked it up, and for season 4 they dropped the whole thing at once, and I hated that. And I tried to review each episode one at a time and release them 1 week at a time, but people didn't really watch those reviews or engage with me, because they just watched it all in one setting and then just moved on and forgot about it. And it prolongs the experience for me if they do one at a time. Now, there are some shows that I like to binge watch, some I'll purposely wait till they're over, The Bad Batch, the Star Wars show, for example, because I'm just not that into that show, and I have no desire to engage with people week to week. I just want to... shows that, not necessarily that I like less, because there's some Netflix shows like Maniac, which I fucking love, was one of my favorite shows, or the show they had last year, Beef, which is also really good. I do really like those shows, but I just have no desire to sort of stop episode by episode and engage with people and see the other, what people are saying and make my own video and give feedback and comments and have this engagement. So some shows just don't work that way. Like some of these Netflix shows I think do work as just get it all out there, and some shows I'm just not as into, like Bad Batch or Stranger Things or stuff like that. I'm okay just watching it all in one setting. But Star Trek, most definitely, any Star Trek show, I want to have that engagement. I want to be able to, stop after each episode and see what other people are saying. So I'm disappointed that Netflix. I mean, I think at the very least, what Netflix could have done is release the first 10 episodes, and then waited like a month or two and released the second, because it seems like it was made that way. Like the episode 10 seems like a good stopping point, like a good mid-season finale. But no, and so it's sort of and so I was thinking, should I review each episode one at a time and have its own separate video? But then I was like, it's not really worth it for when Netflix, when they drop it all on the same day, because people just won't engage with it that way. So I might as well just do it in batches, because that's how it was released. But rather than do all 20 episodes at once, decided to at least split it up, which is what I think Netflix should have done, and do the first 10 episodes and then do the next 10 episodes. So, and that's the other thing with them binge watching, is because some people who are able to watch the entire show in one day or 2 days, where I was actually really, really busy, particularly the day that it dropped. I had so much to do. I only had time to watch 2 episodes. And then, so the next couple of days, I've been trying to get other episodes in. But it's summer. Like, I want to go out and enjoy summer, go swimming and stuff. I don't want to be inside watching Prodigy all day. But that's another thing, though. If this show, I think it says something about the show that I didn't want to sit and watch it all day, because there's some shows that are addictive, where I'm just like, oh, I can't, I'm going through withdrawals if I'm not watching the next episode, especially if I know it's there, that I'm going I have this feeling where I need to watch it immediately, and I didn't have that feeling with Prodigy. Honestly, if Discovery Season 5, which apparently a lot of people didn't like, which I'm surprised, still shocked about, I think they're easily the best season of Discovery, but if Discovery Season 5 was dropped all at once like this, I would be hooked. I wouldn't be able to put it down. I'd be like, oh, I gotta watch the next episode. Whereas this one, I'm not so much. I mean, I am interested in it. I do want to watch the next episode. I would really wanted to just jump straight into episode 11, but no, I had to stop myself because I want to make this video before I see any of the following episodes. So I forced myself to take a break. So I do want to watch what's coming up next, but I'm not having that sort of hankering withdrawal feeling. So, and that's the other thing, is that because there's people who watched it all in the first day or first couple of days, I've heard a lot of opinions from it, and they're all incredibly positive. Some people saying this is one of the best seasons of Modern Trek, and that it was just one of the best seasons of Star Trek period, and it was way outshined season 1, and a completely amazing season. And I think, and this is again a drawback of the dropping it all at the same day, because I have to, people who watch ahead of me. And I think they overhyped it for me, because it raised my expectations to probably an unrealistic level. Whereas so far, don't get me wrong, I'm into the season. I like it. I think it's good. But is it great? Is it one of the best seasons of the Star Trek franchise? Yeah, I don't know. not there for me. I mean, honestly, if we're just looking at these first 10 episodes, I like season 5 of Discovery way better. But that is just me and my humble opinion. And also, on top of that, I like the second half of season 1 of Prodigy better than this first half of season 2. But again, that's maybe not fair to compare, but I heard so many people say, oh, this is way better than season 1, or some people saying, oh, it's just as good as season 1, if not better. And I don't know, I really like that second half of season 1 of Prodigy, maybe more than some people, especially those last 4 episodes I thought were amazing. Whereas I mean, this isn't bad, but I'm yet to be blown away by it. So maybe that will happen in the second half of the season. I don't know. We'll see. So anyway, let me go ahead and jump into the episodes. And again, full spoilers up to episode 10. I'm not going to hold back. So if you haven't seen the full 10 episodes, you might not want to hear me talk about any of this, because I'm not going to I'm not going to withhold any information ahead that I haven't seen. So I'm assuming you've seen up to episode 10. Anyway, so the first episode is Into the Breach, part 1, where we get the cadets, or they're not really cadets, they're just cadet hopefuls, yet they seem to be at the academy. Maybe, okay, so full disclosure, I haven't seen season 1 in a very long time. So I actually, when Netflix first picked up season 1, which I believe was December, I went back and watched the last 4 episodes of season 1 again, because when I saw those first episodes originally, I was in New Zealand, where they didn't have Paramount Plus, so the only way for me to watch it was on my phone, which was still apparently hooked up to the American network that was roaming. So I had to watch it on my phone. If I tried to connect, I couldn't connect it to anything else, because I would have to hook up to the local Wi-Fi, and once it was on the local Wi-Fi, it detected I was not in America and it wouldn't show it to me. So I had to use the data on my phone, and so I wasn't able to hook it up, so I had to watch it in this tiny screen. And so I wanted to watch it on a big normal TV screen, so and I just didn't get a chance to do that before Paramount Plus kicked it off. So as soon as Netflix did it, I wanted to watch those 4 episodes again. So I watched those, but even those I don't remember, like, the small details of what happened at the end, because I don't recall. I thought that this group got into Starfleet Academy, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they just said, oh, we're going to have you trained to get into Starfleet Academy. Because I remember this whole trial or whatever, and Janeway spoke up and said, oh, they deserve to be in Starfleet or whatever. So I thought that meant they were going to the Academy. But apparently, but they just say that they're not in the Academy, yet they seem to be. Like, they're studying with the people, but then Janeway says, oh, cadets, you've earned your place on my ship, and then the doctor meets him and is like, oh, welcome to Voyager A, whatever, and introducing them and saying, we handpicked you for this mission. And Janeway, very briefly is like, oh, it was great to have you on board, but then kind of just shunned them and ignored them. And then when they were on board, they were expected to just study. So, I got a question here. What was the point in bringing them on board? Like, if they were just brought on board to study, but that's what they were already doing at the academy? So, I really don't understand that. Like, I'm sorry, maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe I'll get a well actually comment being, well, actually in season 1 they said this and that. I don't know. As I said, it's been a while since I've seen it, but that's I don't really get what, I mean, why, if you're gonna bring them aboard, especially since, like, they saved the entire Federation and they ran their own starship and they earned Janeway's trust, and so she goes out of the way to bring them aboard and just, like, be like, go to your room and study, and completely shut them out of everything. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't get it. It seems like it's just for plot contrivance in order to have them on the ship so the shit can happen. And it's funny because, Rock Top is very excited about it, though. Well, granted, Rock Top goes to the Cetacean Ops, which I suppose they wouldn't have at Starfleet Academy, but they just put Dahl in the room with some books and be like, here, read some books. Like, why couldn't he have done that at the Academy? Like, I don't know. But anyway. Oh, and then they shove, like, Jenkin Pod in engineering, and it seems like nobody's there. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too nitpicky, and maybe I'm overthinking this. But anyway, we meet these other, like, Nova Squadron, I think they called them, which is what they called Nick Locarno and his group back in the day. So maybe this is the modern day Nova Squadron, and they're all being, like, arrogant pricks, and there's those stupid cadets. They might just be like, those preppy school, like, asshole students from, like, 80s movies with, like, the sweater around their neck and some shit. Or a more Star Trek analogy would be Red Squad. They seem more like Red Squad than they do Nova Squadron, because Red Squad was just a bunch of fucking morons that I don't buy for a second, but that's a whole nother story. But anyway, yeah, so I didn't like these people at first, and I'm like, oh no, they're setting them up to be these big rivals, and you're just going to be pricks to them and be like, oh, you're not supposed to be here. And to be fair, it did start that way, but they did actually move beyond that, which I'm very glad it did. Now, one of the people in this Nova Squad is the same species as Morn. And I was like, they better not have him talk. And sure enough, they have not had him talk so far anyway, so that's good. Anyway, so yeah, mainly, I can't even remember what happens in this episode specifically because it was more just setting things up. It does say part 1, to be fair. But it was mainly just Dahl, like, wanting to get in trouble and go through the Jeffrey tubes and spy and shit and Rock Top. And the whole time I was thinking, oh, maybe Janeway expects them to do this and wants them to be involved, because otherwise, why fucking bring them on board? I still don't get why she brings them on board just to have them do studying, which they could have easily done at Starfleet Academy, but whatever. Anyway, so I guess my rating for Into the Breach Part 1 out of 10 would be a 6. Good, it's fine. Yeah, it's more of a setup, but yeah, it's just getting us there. Anyway, so we'll get into episode 2, which is Into the Breach Part 2, which gets a bit more interesting because they introduce Gwen into the storyline of Season 2, where we see what she's up to, which gets pretty intense. I like what they're doing with her. In fact, I kind of wish that they kept this up. That she goes there to be like, oh yes, I'm here to introduce you to the Federation. There's whole other worlds and other, aliens and starships exist, and they're like, yeah, we know that, because it turns out, what's her face? What's her name? Alencia? Yeah, Cynthia, who was, the evil person from the end of Season 1. She beat them to it and is being evil. and but it was interesting. I still liked it. I thought it was kind of intense setup, and we also get a bit more with Dal and all of them finding out what was the secret ship that Janeway was going to send into the time rift, and they get a weird voice where another rift appears saying, don't go in here, and they're like, okay, sure, we won't do that, and then I don't know what happened because Dahl was up to no good. Trying to start trouble in his neighborhood and wanted to, break into stuff. And I don't know. I can't even remember. But anyway, I guess so my rating for the Into the Breach Part 2 would be a 7. Very good, because the Gwen stuff was a bit more interesting and the story started to pick up a bit more. So next we'll get into episode 3, which is Who Saves the Saviors, which is, from what I remember, where the season really starts to pick up, when they accidentally go on the ship and the Nova Squadron try to stop them, and they just want to go on the ship to look at it or something, but Nova Squadron tries to stop them. They get in a fight and they accidentally launch it. And I was actually surprised that Rocktop and Murph stay behind, because I thought that, it's interesting that they weren't involved in this storyline, that they get caught in a rift and they go through the rift even though, they were told not to, and they get into the future, which they said that the rift, so they want to go rescue Chakotay, but they say that the rift connects both times together, so they're in sync, so time is moving forward at the same rate on one end as they are at another, so they have to wait for some time to pass until Chakotay actually launches the protostar, because if they get to him beforehand, then they'll fuck up the timeline. That part is interesting, and I do buy this. This is different than like Past Tense Part 2, when the time was seen to be moving at the same rate, which made zero sense. It made no sense whatsoever. But here they explain it as there's a rift, and the rift is linking them together, and so to me, I can buy that a bit more, that time is moving concurrently at either side of the rift. So that I'm fine with. And I think that makes perfect sense. But anyway, they go there and they're like, oh, we better not interfere. But then they get chased and then they get captured and they get thrown into the same cell as Chakotay and his Birdman first officer, who's not Michael Keaton, unfortunately. But he is a Birdman, not a bird person, though. But anyway, he's not Rick and Morty. But anyway, and then they had a lot of like stupid jokes with Jake and Pond making bird puns. But by the way, Jake and Pod was mainly the link this season to make it a kids show. He's still acting like, a kids cartoon character, where the rest of the show is actually getting kind of complicated for kids. I mean, I suppose some of the characters like Rocktop and Doll still act like, kids characters from time to time, but like Jake and Pod is pretty much all the time. He's like flat on, straight out of a cartoon meant for like 5-year-olds. Whereas the rest of the show is getting a bit more complex than that, like a cartoon meant for 14-year-olds. But I don't know. But anyway, so they're trapped in the cell with Chakotay and his bird person first officer, and they want to. So they're like, shit, we gotta, not try to interfere with anything. But then one of them, I think it's Zero, gets the idea of, maybe we were meant to interfere. This is kind of a closed loop time. So what he's describing basically is like type 1 time travel, which is what they did in Time's Arrow, which I just watched. And I complained about that because Star Trek has always been type 2 time travel. It's just a singular timeline. You go back in time, you change something that alters the timeline, you have to go back and fix it. That's always what Star Trek has been like. So it's kind of irritating to me that Zero is like, maybe we're meant to do that. So they go and help Chakotay, and they do help him get out of the cell, but then they realize that, oopsie, they left a phaser behind. So instead of what is supposed to happen is the bird person is supposed to get killed, and Chakotay can't get to the ship, so he launches it, and he ends up going in the past. But because he had that phaser, they were actually able to get it on the ship, so he and the bird person get on the ship and fly away. which totally fucks things up. And so we see Gwen, she's having this like test thing with Essentia, where they're like, she's trying to, she met her own father, by the way, which is really nice seeing the younger version of this character, and John Noble still voice him, and he's saying that he's actually like a really nice guy in this timeline. So I thought that was really interesting. But while she's doing this like combative test where she is supposed to beat Essentia in order to prove to the elders of that planet or whatever that she's telling the truth, she starts phasing out of nothing and disappearing because Dahl fucked up the timeline. So here's my question. Here's my question about this one. Since when is Star Trek Back to the Future? Like, maybe someone can explain to me why she's phasing out of time and she doesn't just vanish. Like, shouldn't it be like a Yesterday's Enterprise situation where if they change the future? Now, with Janeway and Voyager A, I can actually excuse that because she said that they had like temporal shielding, and that's been present in Star Trek, that if you have these temporal shieldings or whatever, that it can protect you. That's what happened in past tense. And so if they would have said that they're unaffected by the time changes, then I'm perfectly okay with that. But why is Gwen like phasing out like she's in Back to the Future instead of just not existing? Did she have a time thing on? As far as I'm concerned, or I know that she didn't. So I don't know. That bugged me a little bit, but whatever. I'm just willing. I'll go with it. It's a cartoon, so I'll go where they follow. So I guess my rating for Who Saves the Saviors out of 10 would be I guess it'll be an 8. It was kind of interesting with Chakotay thing and everything like that. So yeah, I'll give it an 8. Okay, so the next episode is episode 4, Temporal Mechanics 101. So I went back and watched a couple of these episodes, just flipped through them again to remind myself exactly what happened. And I did find the possible explanation as to why Gwen's acting like she's in Back to the Future, which I think is flimsy, but at least the show attempts to answer it. And that is, Janeway did say that the wormhole was linking the two timelines together. So it wasn't just like Voyager A was protected from it. Apparently it was like arguably any changes in the timeline would still be kind of protected from it as long as that wormhole is open because it's linked them together. I think that's kind of weak and doesn't make the most sense in the world, but again, at least it's trying to explain it. And by the time they collapse the wormhole, which I believe they do in the next episode, they already put that like time thingy on the temporal disruptor or stabilizer, whatever the hell the doctor calls it. They already put that on Gwen, so that would explain why she's still around after they collapsed the wormhole. But apparently the wormhole was the reason why she was still around, but kind of out of phase or whatever. So I don't know. I don't think it's completely consistent with Star Trek or makes a ton of sense, but you know, at least they tried to explain it, so I'll just go with it. Anyway, in this episode, they're all Dahl and the Vulcan, Majel or whoever, and Zero and Jenkin Potter still in the past, and they are able to make contact with Janeway, or Janeway's able to make contact with them, and they let them know that, hey, we just fucked up the timeline, and they get a secret message that's telling them where to go. So Janeway is helping them out and sends Dahl the Temporal Mechanics 101 class, which is a running joke throughout the season, which I thought was kind of funny. Everyone's like, didn't you read Temporal Mechanics 101? And so he finally reads it, and it's So the person giving the lecture apparently is an actual science advisor in real life to Star Trek, and has done some videos about the science on Star Trek. Apparently, I hadn't heard of her myself. But I thought it would have been cool if it was Badgie. So, you're trying to change the timeline. But anyway, we'll get the Lower Decks reference later on. But anyway, I thought that was, so I thought this Temporal Mechanics 101 class was kind of useless. It's saying, oh, big event, like it doesn't really help explain the plot anymore. It's just like, big events can change the timeline. Yeah, we already know that. And then they say, oh, you want to build a time machine? Use a wormhole. Oh, okay. We already know that. And then they say, oh, watch out for different realities or whatever, quantum realities. And that doesn't seem to apply. And then when they meet up with Gwen and Dahl's like, oh, she's, out of phase or whatever. She's partly here and partly not here. Didn't you read Temporal Mechanics 101? It doesn't explain that. Or at least what he saw didn't explain that. But anyway, so yeah, they get the message of coordinates they go to. They go there, and they don't find anyone there because they're in the future. So the Jacob Pod changes the ship to make it turn it into a time ship. So they travel back into the past where Gwen is and hanging out with her father, younger version of her father, and they see that she's out of phase, so they work to save her, and they, since they're back in the proper time, Jenkins Pod's like, oh, the ship won't work at all, it doesn't fly, but then the magic savior, gets the ship working again, and they go back to Voyager. Now, honestly, I was thinking that this magic person that's like dropping them all these hints and telling them where to go and helping them save the ship, I was thinking that this is like a Bill and Ted situation, where, referring to the movie Bill and Ted, of course, where they wanted things to happen, but so the future versions of them went back and helped the past versions of them. Like they needed a rope, so a rope would appear because the future versions traveled back in time and put a rope there for them to have, just as an example. So that's what I assumed here, that this was the future versions of themselves going back and helping these versions of themselves. But as I said, getting into spoilers for later episodes, that appears not to be the case. If we're to believe that this was Wesley the whole time, which I think does sort of make sense. So anyway, so my rating for Temporal Mechanics 101, I guess I'll give this an 8 too. It was fairly interesting. Kept things going. So then we'll get into Observer's Paradox. Where the crew, the Prodigy crew goes back to Voyager A, and they're debriefed, and they have this silly scene of them being debriefed, and Gwen's acting like she's in trouble. I was like, well, why are you in trouble? Like, you didn't do anything. You didn't steal a ship. You were off, almost killed on your mission, and now you're phasing out of existence. So, I don't know. I don't know why she'd be acting like she's in trouble. But anyway, this episode's mainly about them trying to communicate with Murph, because we see that Murph is communicating with the weird alien being or whatever, which we later find out is Wesley. And no one can understand Murph properly, and so you get the funny things when Murph, like, they're sitting there talking at lunch, and Murph is stealing their food, and no one's paying any attention to him while he's doing that, but then creates this spiral thing, and they track down the spiral of being like connected to Chakotay, so they think that Chakotay is communicating with Murph, and yet no one can understand what Murph is saying. Why doesn't the universal translator work for Murph? Like, when Jacob Pad's like, oh, you don't speak Murphese. I'm like, well, why doesn't the universal translator speak Murphy's? Now they could say, oh, their language is too complex for the universal translator, but typically, like, even with the alien species they just met, if this happened before, it's happened on Deep Space Nine with the species from the Gamma Quadrant, where the universal translator didn't really have enough information to translate it, but the more they talked, the more it did, so it slowly started translating their stuff for them. Well, Murph has been, around since the end of season 1. He was in the Federation, so arguably maybe a couple months, maybe, and yet the universal translator still hasn't figured out his language. I don't know. I that seems a bit plot convenience to me why they can't. But I do like how this episode treats Murph more like a character and less of a fun little cute little thing mascot that go. They actually treat him a bit more like a character, so at least I like that aspect of it. But anyway, Rocktop comes up with a way to use cetacean ops, and for some reason these whales can communicate with Murph when the universal translator can't. Okay, whatever. I don't know. And so they get these coordinates, or get these, not coordinates, but these numbers, which turns out to be the dial that Gwen needs to change on her little device thingy in order to send her to this weird space Cosmo experience where she's told that the spiral's a map and they need to go somewhere. So yeah. Okay, whatever. I mean, this episode was fine. I guess I'll give this one a 7. Why not? Anyway, so the next episode is Imposter Syndrome, which is kind of a silly episode. So they find out that they want to sneak on the ship in order to go on the secret mission to find Chakotay's signal or whatever. But they don't want people to realize that they're gone, so they create holograms of themselves in order to so for the holograms to stay behind, kind of like a Ferris Bueller's Day Off situation, so that they think they're actually still there on the ship, so they can go off, sneak off. And then Janeway has orders by Jellicoe, Jellicoe, by the way, is the perfect choice for the dumb, shitty asshole admiral, because he was a dumb, shitty asshole captain, so it makes sense he would be a dumb, shitty asshole admiral. But anyway, I think I talked about that in season 1 of Prodigy. But anyway, so Jellicoe, being the dumb, shitty asshole admiral, orders Janeway, and apparently he's a higher rank admiral than Janeway, but he's kind of ordering her around like she's a captain when really she's an admiral. But I don't know. I don't know how that works. But anyway, and why did he get promoted above her? Because she's been an admiral ever since Nemesis. But anyway, sorry. Yeah, he orders her to destroy the ship. So she goes to destroy the ship, and then the Dahl and the crew realize, hey, this is a perfect opportunity to steal the ship, because we can let them think it's destroyed, but really we'll steal it and we'll go off on an adventure. So they're kind of on a time crunch to get to the ship first before it's destroyed. And problem is, the holograms that they create as a distraction are too perfect. Rocktop did too good of a job to the point where they think they're the real people and the other people are the holograms. So we get this whole goofy cartoonish sequence of the holograms and the real people going around, and you don't really know which one's real, which ones aren't, and they don't even know, and they're kind of mixing it up and trying to catch us and be like, you're the hologram, no, you're the hologram. And I think of like that whole Spider-Man meme, the two Spider-Mans pointing at each other, until both the Rocktops realize, hey, let's stop working against each other and we'll work together to find out which one of us are holograms and which ones aren't, which was nice. So, and I actually think I buy this storyline. I think it makes sense because it makes sense that Rocktop would fuck up like in this manner, that she would be. I mean, the way she's almost too smart, like a Wesley Crusher or Mary Sue situation. But again, since this is just like a cartoon, I'm more willing to like go with it or whatever. So I kind of like that she messed up, that she's like didn't think through the nuance and just like, oh, let's have them think they are the real us so they can do a better job of pretending to be us while we're gone. But it was too good. So I kind of like that she messed up in that way. And that so they would go after them thinking that they're the holograms and try to stop them. That was a bit goofy, though. I don't know. But anyway, Rocktop thing works just in the nick of time. Then she revamps the holograms so they don't know about the plan. So they're not going to go try to go off on the ship when they need to go it. And they get there just in the nick of time. And they steal the ship. But then Rocktop was like, oh yeah, something seems to be wrong with the holograms, but I'm sure it's fine. And then we see them all like acting like other other characters, like their personalities got mixed up with their bodies, which is kind of goofy. But anyway, so my rating for Observer's Paradox, hey, probably a 5. I'll give this a 5 because it's not the worst thing ever, but kind of just, it was goofy. It wasn't not entirely necessary. Or it's not Observer's Paradox. That was a previous episode. This is Imposter Syndrome. Anyway, so yeah, my rating for Imposter Syndrome. Anyway, which is the title that makes sense for this episode. Anyway, we'll get into the next episode, episode 7, The Fast and the Curious, where they travel through a Borg conduit and they get captured by this Kazon, and he demands to go in a race to train this thing, but it turns out the Kazon is just being controlled by some evil AI, and they're captured, and it looks like that they're going to be trapped there forever, but Zero risks his own life and to destroy the AI and save them. Ooh, this episode was dumb. I'm sorry, this is easily my least favorite episode so far. Maybe, yeah, I don't know if it's my least favorite episode of the entire show, but it's up there. Yeah, it was just like, it was boring. It didn't make sense, and it was just like, oh, there's a Kazon, but he's actually being controlled by this evil AI. Like, who cares? Like, that all happened like very fast, and I had no interest in any of this. Nothing that would make me even care remotely about what's going on. And then they're racing each other. Like, why the fuck are they racing? Like, I hate that whole racing trope thing. And it's just, The Fast and the Curious is an appropriate name for the episode because it's very fast paced and and it just speeds through the plot, and it doesn't have any direction or focus or any character moments. The only good thing about it is that Zero's, almost sacrificing his life to save everyone, and it has repercussions that are felt in the next episode. So it's the only reason why it needs to exist. So my rating for The Fast and the Curious out of 10 is going to be a 2. Extremely poor. Yeah, it's not a good episode. So anyway, get into episode 8, which is there in beauty no truth, which is a nice sort of fun little play on the words. That is there in truth no beauty, which was the original series episode that featured the Medusans, so it's appropriate that this episode's about Medusans. Has Zero's mechanical suit is falling apart, and he's not going to be able to function anymore because of what he did in the previous episode, but he gets a sort of telepathic message from other, I can't remember if it was other Medusans, but it's other, I think it was another Medusan, but anyways, other non-corporeal beings, and they talk about this colony nearby where all these non-corporeal beings live together. He mentions, I believe, Medusans, Paxans, and the calamarain. I can't remember if they mentioned any other species. I think those are the only ones they mentioned. So we know who the Medusans are. The Paxans are the aliens from Clues that goes, the plan has failed. Which they were isolationists, so why would they go and join this colony? That seems like they were like xenophobic. I don't know. So that seemed out of character for them, but whatever. And the calamarain were those like blue glowy thingies from Deja Q that tried to kill that, like, apparently Q tormented them and they were trying to kill him as soon as he became mortal, and the Enterprise kept having to save Q from them, and they were being really annoying. So we didn't really know much about them other than they don't like Q. But they seem like the Federation never heard of them before, so they seem to be like, way out there in a different dimension or some shit. But anyway, so they go to the planet and they see these, tall, lanky, green dudes, and they're like, wait a second, we thought these were non-corporeal beings. And they're like, yes, you are correct. They are. They just found the way to create corporeal bodies for himself. By the way, I talked about how Jankampad was making silly kids jokes. I kind of like the joke, even though it was really dumb. I kind of like the joke. He said that, that's a planet of nobodies. Get it? Because they're non-corporeal, they have no body. I actually like that joke. Don't know why. But anyway, they go there and find out they do, in fact, have bodies because they're able to create bodies for non-corporeal beings. Now, the whole time I was really worried that they'd fall into cliche territory. With this episode, I was worried that the non-corporeal beings would end up like being evil and like it'd be hating corporeal beings, and would like be like trying to think of other examples. I think the Search is probably an example with the founders. Like they hated when Kira showed up and they hated all solids or whatever. But I think there was other examples in Star Trek where they went to this place and they're like, oh, you're welcome here, but they actually hated their friends because they're not like them. And so I thought that would be the case, that these non-corporeal beings would try to kill Dahl and the others, but thankfully that wasn't the case. They were lying to Zero, withholding some information from Zero for no good reason. So that was but in the grand scheme of things, like, that's not too bad. Like, that doesn't really bother me. It would bother me way more if they turned out to be evil, if they tried to kill them, or whatever. And it turned out that his body would start to fall apart if he left the planet. And so I also thought that maybe they were like, you can't leave, you must stay here forever. But instead Zero's like, I'd rather leave and be with my friends. And they're like, okay, all good, you do you, good for you. I like that. I like that they didn't fall into cliche territory. Now the stuff with like them running from their lives and this giant stingray, flying stingray was trying to kill them. It was a little bit goofy, but it was still, all in all, it was a good character story for Zero, because they kind of were hinting at how he's getting a bit of a love connection with the Magell, or whatever her name is, and the Vulcan lady, but he felt like he wanted to feel, and he felt like lonely, that he's just like non-corporeal, and he wanted to know what it was like to feel sensations and to eat. And so to follow it up in this manner where to actually see this major change and this regular character is almost like if they actually made Data human, which I'm kind of disappointed they never did, but it's like going the full step, changing up this character. So I liked it. I think it was, it was more of a standalone story, but it was still good, and I think it worked overall. So my rating for Is There in Beauty No Truth out of 10 is an 8. So we get into the two-parter that ends the first half of the season. The Devourer of All Things, Part 1. So, this is where I get a bit tricky about the time travel logic. If you thought my complaint about the Back to the Future thing was more of a minor thing, I have more of an issue with this. But anyway, before I get into that, they go there and they find out that the person who'd been sending them these messages was Wesley Crusher. And I actually love this. I think this is a really good use of Wesley. Much better than the bullshit they did in Picard Season 2. And I did feel like they were just disregarding Picard Season 2, but until the end of the episode where they go back in the 60s and it turned out to be like a Simon Earth type machine. So they were referencing, that's Picard Season 2 is the one that referenced that the Travelers were the same beings that Gary Seven and all of them, which I fucking hate that, but even it's there in canon. I wish they would just ignore it and retcon it, but whatever. I was very much against the whole thing about Wesley becoming a traveler in the first place. Nemesis apparently was going to retcon that and have Wesley be back in the Starfleet, but they did. That was the deleted scene. Since they deleted it from the theatrical release, then now that's retconned and they ignore that and say he's still a traveler. I kind of wish that they had done that, to be perfectly honest. I would have rather him being Starfleet. But I think this whole traveler thing is a bit dumb. But anyway, it is what it is. And I do like the use of him. I like it. To me, this episode makes me feel a lot better about it, though. It makes me feel better about him being a traveler. Picard Season 2 certainly didn't. And I like the way that they use him, that he was the one sending the messages, and that the way he acts. Like, I love Will Wheaton's vocal performance here. I think it's so good. It's really nice seeing him again in a better way than Picard Season 2. And the way that he's like kind of goofy, and his train of thought just keeps going. He's like all happy and making jokes about it. I think that really, really works. Now, time travel logic I have a problem with is now they're doing Langoliers time travel kind of logic. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Langoliers was a Stephen King novel that they made into like a mini-series back in the 90s that the visual effects did not age well at all. I mean, even in I remember watching it in 2008 and thinking, oh my god, this looks so cheap. But anyway, yeah, if you never read the book, it's saw the TV miniseries. It was basically people getting on this plane, they go through a time rift without realizing it, and they travel back in time. But apparently in that universe, time travel doesn't work like, oh, you just travel back in 5 hours in the past and you're back in the past and you see everyone. Their time travel logic was there was these, alien monsters going around eating the past, and they were called the Langoliers, and so that time moves, everyone moves in time, but the actual thing that happens in the past is no longer exists. It's just stale, and that these monsters eat up the past behind them. And they didn't do that exactly, but it seems similar. So the situation they presented is that because of the paradox of Gwen existing, which apparently is because of those two wormholes connected these alternate timelines, which again I'm iffy on, but whatever. And then after the wormhole went away, she has that thingy on her. And so Wesley's talking about how their whole universe is falling apart, and it's because the paradox is ripping the whole universe apart. I get that they like Gwen, and that they don't want her to never exist, and that they, and I do too. Gwen's awesome, and I would get why they do that. But if it's either her or the universe, I think you should choose the universe, kind of, sort of. But maybe, they're not acting like that's the case. They're acting like, well, even if I think Gwen even said that, oh, I'll sacrifice myself, but then Wesley's like, oh, this is beyond you. How exactly? If she's the only part of the it seems like she's the only paradox. It's only because they kept the thing on here because that wormhole is closed. Nothing else is kind of existing that shouldn't exist. So if she goes away, then where's the paradox? Like, I'm sorry, I'm very confused. Maybe someone will have an explanation for that. And I'll be fine. I'll be open to hear explanation for why it's the paradox is beyond just her. But the whole thing of, well, our universe is doomed and it's falling apart because of a paradox and these monster Langoliers. I can't remember, they're not Langoliers. I can't remember what they're called. These monsters are consuming dead universes. I'm sorry, that's what I have a problem with. That is very un-Star Trek-like. That is... Like, since when is this Star Trek the Langoliers? I'm sorry. But there's never, like, monsters that eat dying universe from the paradox. The way that time travel has always worked in Star Trek is that, I don't know, if there's a paradox or something that shouldn't exist, it just blinks out of existence. It's not like the whole universe explodes like Back to the Future, again, Back to the Future logic, and the universe is dying, and so there's monsters going around eating dying universes. Like that, I'm sorry, that seems silly to me. And not only is it like, because again, there's some things I'm willing to, because I know Star Trek can be very inconsistent with their time travel logic anyway. Like, I did a whole video about describing all the instances of time travel logic working differently. For the vast majority, it is type 2, where it's simply one timeline. If you change it, it affects the future, and the future is altered. But there's never been a thing about a paradox destroying the whole universe and monsters going around eating dying universes. Like, and then the Travelers just like jumped ship and left. And plus, it's making the Travelers off to be way more powerful than they were described in TNG. Like, they exist in I don't know. I did like the way Wesley was talking about thought controlling everything, because that is consistent with the Travelers, so that they were at least being consistent with that, so there were aspects of that I really liked, but I'm sorry, I didn't like the Langoliers. I thought they were goofy. So, again, my rating for the Devourer of All Things Part 1 will also be an 8. I loved Wesley and how he worked, but I didn't like the Langoliers. Alright, so finally come to the final episode of this video, the Devourer of All Things Part 2. And so this one, starts out with Wesley and the gang hiding in the Gary 7 type thing. And why is their hidden room being like Gary 7's place? I don't know. I didn't fully get that. And Wesley's distracted by the vinyl record or whatever. But anyway, so this one dealt mainly with the I keep calling them Langoliers. Can't remember what they're called. The time erasing pursuers, but I don't know what the hell they're called. But anyway, Janeway has to deal with them, and she sends an away team down, including Nigel, and she wants to find Zero because she can sense his presence. And this red shirt, I knew that red shirt was going to die, by the way. I was like, oh, it's this character we'd never seen before, beaming down with the two characters we know. He's dead. And, not just dead, but erased from all existence. They don't remember he exists because the Langoliers got them. But anyway, she kind of fucked things up by looking for Zero. They were actually fine, but she was going to die, and Zero and Dahl couldn't let that happen, so they go out of their way to save her, but in doing so, they give up their position to the Langoliers that go and get them, so Wesley has to do all these fancy stuff, and then we get Janeway, like, getting down to her tank top shirt and getting on the ship and blowing them up. And again, I didn't really get the battle thing between these Langoliers because they seemed kind of immune to phaser fire, except when they weren't. Like sometimes, most of the times they were, but then sometimes they weren't. And then I guess when Janeway decides to be a badass, then they're all of a sudden not. Well, I know. Okay, so she did say that she was adjusting the phasers to their phase frequency output or whatever the fuck technobabble shit. So okay, so then they started being effective, but still, I don't know. There was something about the whole battle thing that seemed a bit, I don't know, goofy to me, I suppose. I don't know. I just don't like these Langoliers. I don't like them. They don't make any sense. They're just, the whole concept of them, I think, is silly and nothing that Star Trek should do. So I'm sort of stuck on that and can't really look past that. But anyway, they do manage to, Wesley gets his machine going and he tries to do the Doctor Strange thing where he tries to find the one possibility where they could actually set things right, and he couldn't find it. He's like, what? I thought I could find it when he hooked up the 6 people, but then he realized, let's hook up the Vulcan, Magell or whatever, to it as well. And she and they're like, I get it now, she needs to go, and then you need all 7 of you to go because we want her to be a main character in the show now, so now she's important. and they step through the portal, and then Janeway shows up before. It's like, don't go through the portal, which seems like kind of a waste of time. Like, I don't know. Seems like she's just getting in the way, as always. But anyway, and so yeah, they step through the portal and go to the past or whatever. I don't know. Anyway. Or maybe it's the future. Well, they go to wherever Chakotay is. So that's all I know so far. That's what I've seen up to. I guess my rating for Devourer Vaultings Part 2 probably is 7. The Langoliers bother me, but it was interesting enough. As I said, I like the Wesley stuff. It's kind of interesting, but it seemed like Magell kind of just fucked things up by looking for Zero and made things worse. But whatever, it was alright. It was fine. So another thing I wanted to mention is that there are several references to other modern Trek shows so far in these first 10 episodes, which I did enjoy. I like that they're sort of connecting everything together. First, the most obvious is that they mentioned they had some line about how the rest of the fleet is busy helping the Romulans evacuate. So that's a callback to Picard Season 1 and the events of the Romulans. This must have been before they called off the evacuation, so before the android attack on Mars happened. So that should actually happen soon if they're mentioning that. But anyway, they also, of course, the bigger one, the one I was very happy to hear, is when the Doctor is like, yes, we haven't seen a crew this dysfunctional since the Cerritos. And I like that. I like to call out to the Cerritos and pointing out just how dysfunctional they are. But I would hope that in time that they would become to know better than that. But anyway, they probably still have a bad reputation. But the other one comes in the later episode with Wesley, when he's talking about the different planes of existence. He's like, yeah, sure, there's the prime universe, the mirror universe, there's the fluidic space, and the mycelial plane. Oh wait, you're not supposed to know about that one. So pretty sure he's talking about the mycelial network that Discovery travels through in order to, go through their time existence. We did see those one beings that lived there that one time. And so, yes, they're not supposed to know about that because everything about Discovery was classified and everyone was acting like that never existed or that never happened, and there was only a select few who knew about it, and said because that technology went to the future, to the 32nd century, and so yes, it makes sense that Wesley the Traveler would know about it, but he was like, oh, you're not supposed to know about that yet because it doesn't become common knowledge until the 32nd century. So that was a nice callback. That was a nice shout out. That I did enjoy these little references to Modern Trek. I mean, obviously we got a lot of references to Legacy Trek as well, but the ones to Modern Trek I think I appreciate a little bit more. So yeah, the one thing I think is that I didn't kind of like about this season so far is that they kind of seem to revert back to Admiral Janeway, because in most of season 1, Admiral Janeway was just off doing her own thing, and she was kind of interfering with what Dal and the other group wanted to do, and they kind of sort of got that same format going, although she's a bit more helpful this time around. But at first she was like locking them out of everything, which I don't get why she invited them on the ship in the first place, if she was just going to lock them out. And then the whole thing with Dal constantly like wants to get in trouble and disobey orders and throw orders and go off on wild goose chases, and it seems like the only reason he does that is so they can be the main characters in the show, because if they don't do that, then they really have nothing to do. So in order for the show to happen, they have to constantly disobey and fuck things up, where a lot of it, like towards the beginning, especially once Dal and everyone got back from the future after they fucked up the timeline to get these messages from Chakotay, I kept thinking, why don't they just go to Janeway? Why don't they go to Janeway? And I think they made it some bullshit excuse of, oh, well, she has orders from Starfleet not to do this, and if we tell her, she might be ordered not to, and then we'll lose our only opportunity to do it. Kind of flimsy logic. I'm not really. Its main reason is because we want these 5 or these 6 to be the main characters of the show. If they tell Janeway, then Janeway gets senior officers to go, and these 6 won't be the main characters of the show anymore. So they need to go off and run off on all these wacky adventures so Dal can be the captain again, and they can be off on their own. So it's kind of a contrived way to revert things back into season 1, in my humble opinion. But anyway, I am not going to give my rating for the first half of season 1, because I'm going to wait till all of season 2. Sorry, I'm going back. Not going to give my rating for the first half of season 2, because I'm going to wait till all of season 2 is finished, and I'll give my rating for the season overall. Because as I said, we still got 10 more episodes, so maybe I will. I mean, so far I'm liking it, though. I'm not. Again, I could see a lot of people maybe being annoyed with my review and thinking I'm being too negative on it, because I seem to not be as positive as a lot of other reviews that I saw and a lot of other people who talked to me about this. So far, I think the end of season 1 was better, but we'll see. We still got 10 more episodes. Maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe I'll start to think it's just as amazing as everyone else is thinking it is. I'm open, so we'll see how that goes. And I will be back in 1 week, to cover, the last 10 episodes of season 2. So you can check me out for that. In the meantime, I continue to cover Star Trek Next Generation 1 episode at a time, currently in season 5. So check out my channel for that, and I'll see you all in a week.